but these things turned out pretty good. Definitely way more happy with how this looks than how it looked previously. All right, so we're gonna get started tearing this transmission out. We still have a few things to disconnect, like these cooler lines, drive shaft out, and then we can yank the transmission out. We gotta get the exhaust off. We'll drain out some of the oil so we don't end up with another Exxon Valdez in here, and we'll get the belt housing adapter off, the new one on, go from there. All right, so in the last video, I talked about moving the engine forward, and the issue was gonna be this front motor mount here. There's only 1 3/4 inches between here and the core support. It was gonna be touching. I should have taken more measurements, but I didn't, because I was like, oh, that's gonna hit before anything else hits. So started looking at this the other day. So my thought is I'm gonna cut this engine mount back, move the front bolt back, so we'll be able to trim off a couple inches here. We'll move this hole back somewhere into here, so then we'll be able to move the engine forward. That'll still give us like a gap between the two if need be. We can reach up in there and still get like a wrench up in there to tighten hose clamps. I did consult an engineer. I actually did consult an engineer on this, and he said, yeah, it's fine. So we're gonna take the bolts out of the side of this engine mount, and we're gonna go ahead and get it cut down. We're gonna drill new holes for our bolts to go through, tap the holes, and move that back. And then we'll start looking at the cross member, see if we can move this mount forward slightly too. Doesn't look like we're going to be able to move it very far, but if we can, we're going to try. So that way it's as far forward as we can get it. And the other thing I want to do is I want to make the cross member narrower, because I had to remove the oil pan to put the oil pump in, and getting to these front 4 bolts was just a nightmare. Alright, so yesterday we got the front mount here cut down. It would have been nice to take off both sides of this mount, but this one's behind the air compressor, and I was struggling to take off the air compressor because there's a rear mount that I didn't see, but the air compressor is going to have to come off anyways for the cam followers, I believe. So we're going to have to get that off either way. You can see now, so there's where the engine used to sit for the front mount. And you can see we moved the hole back about 1 inch. So then we went ahead and we got all these other holes in this plate welded in so you can't see them. Move the bolts closer together. So that'll bring the engine about 1 inch forward. And then today I'm going to work on this front cross member and get this whole mount moved forward as far as we can on the cross member. That's how far forward the engine's going to come. So I'm actually excited to be doing this, because when I set this engine in place, I knew nothing about driveline angle or anything, and somehow I didn't screw it up. So the engine sits at 4 degrees and the rear pinion sits at 3. It was a degree, and I kind of split them at the transfer case, and we never had any vibrations or anything. But you're probably not gonna be able to tell, but the engine sits in here crooked. It like goes off one of the directions, and it also tilts one way. So I'm glad that we're gonna be able to do this. So hopefully I can do a little better this time. And by the time I noticed that it was sitting in there crooked and stuff, everything was already like built and painted, and we were getting ready to push it out the door. And I was like, well, oh well. But anyways, we're getting the chance to fix that now. Hopefully we can do that. All right, so our front mount is in. It's all bolted down. Brought the engine 1.5 inches closer to the front of the truck. Once we get the engine plucked out, I'll finish modifying the cross member, because like I said, I want to cut it back so that you can actually get to these front oil pan bolts without really hating yourself. So now we're back here. I was in the middle of cutting off the passenger side mount. I decided to start with this one. I don't know why. I tell you what, it reminds me of the scene from the Santa Claus where Charlie's scrubbing off graffiti and he's like, Dad, this stuff doesn't like to come off. Tim Allen's like, hence. This stuff doesn't want to come off. It's on there. But we're making it through. It's kind of difficult, and I got halfway through and I was like, you know what, I should really bolt up the new flywheel adapter, because what if they are different? What if the bolts aren't in the same place and I build these mounts with this flywheel adapter and then things don't line up? So we're going to go ahead and get this flywheel adapter pulled off. It'll make it easier for us to get this last piece of engine mount off the frame without that flywheel housing on there, and then we'll get the new one bolted up. I don't have a new rear main seal yet, but that's okay. Alright, so we're getting ready to put this bell housing adapter back on. Kind of glad that I chose to pull that off when I did. It made it a lot easier to get the old mounts cut off. And I also realized that the bolt pattern on these mounts is different. So anyways, I was surprised when I pulled this off. I didn't see any type of gasket between the back of the engine and this adapter. No RTV, no paper gaskets, nothing. I was told that they use this stuff here, which is a Loctite, part number 38657, high flex gasket maker. I was told this is not like RTV silicone, so don't use RTV. They said use this stuff here. I did have two spots where I kind of got into the surface with a screwdriver when I was taking this off, you know, and I had a moment where I didn't realize that there were 4 more bolts out. It works a lot easier to get these things off when you take all the bolts out of it. So I went ahead yesterday and filled them in with some RTV, let it dry, and then used a razor blade today to scrape it off so it's a smooth surface now. Because this stuff here, I don't think it ever dries. I've never used this before, but I squeezed a little out the other day onto a piece of paper, and it's been there about a week and it's still tacky. So, and I have no idea how much of this stuff you're supposed to use. Awesome. I don't know if it's really necessary to shmoo your goo around, but I was a big fan of finger painting when I was a kid and I just couldn't resist. You know what? Remember, your main seal might be out in the mailbox. Well, the good news is this stuff doesn't dry, so I'll be right back. I was also told to put a little bit of this gasket maker stuff on the threads. This will help to seal the threads and act as like a Loctite. So for bolt torque on these, a lot of times CAT doesn't give like a specific value for a fastener. They just tell you to use the torque spec for that size fastener. So for these bigger bolts, the majority of them, they're going to be 131 foot-pounds. The 2 smaller ones up top here, those are going to be 47 foot-pounds. And this one small one here is going to be 24 foot-pounds. Alright guys, so like I said earlier in this video, last time I set this engine in here and got all the mounts built, I had no idea what driveline angle was or meant or any of that, and somehow I did not screw it up. I don't know how. I'm going to walk you through how to figure out your driveline angle and all that fun stuff. They make fancy tools that you can get that probably don't cost that much money, but I just use my phone. Alright, so the first step in figuring out your driveline angle is you're going to want to figure out what your pinion is set to. Pull your drive shaft out, set your yoke so it's vertical like that, and then you use the measure app on your phone. You set it to your old level, stick it across your yoke gears. You can see mine says 5 degrees, so that is our driveline angle. So what that means for us is everything needs to be set at right around 5 degrees. So the transfer case, the yoke coming off the back of that needs to be set to 5 degrees, the yoke coming off the front needs to be 5 degrees, and the yoke coming off the back of our transmission needs to be at 5 degrees. JC Smith just did a video where he kind of talked about driveline angle and what it means and stuff that I didn't know. So basically that means we need to get this engine set in here at 5 degrees, and we've been out here for a while now. You can see we got a lot of straps going on and trying to get the engine exactly where I want it, and currently we're at about 4 degrees on the valve cover here, and I left it intentionally a little bit high because those rubber mounts do have a little bit of give. So as you set it down on those mounts, it'll sink a little bit in the rear here, so that should give us our 5-ish degrees. Placing the engine, the factory Ford engine was 3 inches offset from center. I don't know if it was exactly 3 inches. I measured up front and I put this engine in 3 1/8 off to the passenger side. It's really a pain back here because there's like nothing straight or square to measure off of, so it took us quite a bit of time, but we are within like a 1/16 of an inch. One thing I didn't really do last time, you gotta measure side to side, make sure you're zeroed out there. So we're gonna get started building our mount. All right, so we've been plugging away at this. We got our passenger side mount done. Pretty happy with the way that turned out. It's a little bit shorter, it's further forward, so this should be much better for us, a little bit stronger. We used the old frame from the Louisville to make these side plates. I don't know, that's like 5/16, 3/8, something like that. It's pretty thick stuff. I've blown through like 10 cutoff wheels and a grinder so far cutting this stuff up, but we're busy working on this other side. It's still warm. We got one of our plates cut out there. This is a lot of eyeball work, and then once we get both of them welded in, I'll mark them and cut the top to the right height. That's what I did over here. And I also, that was loud, I also put these in at 4 degrees. That way it's sitting level with the engine and the mounts aren't tweaked weirdly. So we'll get this one welded on where I want it, and then we'll start making the other side and top for it. We'll have a mount. All right, so we got both mounts done now. Well, they're not 100% done. Once we get the engine pulled and we start to paint the engine, I want to add in a few more pieces in here to help give them a little bit more strength. Honestly, I don't think they're going anywhere, but a few more gussets is not gonna hurt. I also didn't finish fully welding them because there's an engine in my way. So once we get the engine out, we'll finish welding these out, add a few more gussets to them, get things painted. But these things turned out pretty good. Definitely way more happy with how this looks than how it looked previously. They're both kind of the same, and I think they're definitely a little bit stronger. Plus, the engine sits in there straight. That was the worst thing. I always hated that. You know, the engine sat a little crooked, you know, had a little list. So I'm definitely glad that we took the time to remake these mounts. You know, our skills have come quite a ways since the first time we mounted this engine in here, and now things are just going to be much better. Got to do the home fabrication test. It's not going anywhere. All right, so that's going to be a wrap for this video. If you guys like this video, go ahead and hit that thumbs up button. We did fire up an Instagram this week. I'm still not sure why. I don't know what you use Instagram for besides posting pictures and stuff, but that's there if you're into that kind of thing. I'll leave the link somewhere. And if you haven't already, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. It's free. Doesn't get any better than that. Be sure to tune in next week. We are going to start to reseal the engine. We got to do the cam followers. We're going to do front and rear main seals. We're going to do the oil cooler and anything else that we come across that is leaking, but I'm pretty sure that's pretty much all the seals. So be sure you stay tuned for all of that. Stay frosty. What does that even mean?